The sun blazed mercilessly over the parched earth of Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1882. When Thea Reynolds first laid eyes on the peculiar sight that would change her life forever. A tall, broad-shouldered man hammered nails into the weathered porch of the abandoned Patterson homestead, his right arm working with mechanical precision while his left hand clutched what appeared to be a folded piece of paper, held against his chest like a talisman. Thea pulled back on the reins of her chestnut mare, dust billowing around them as they came to a halt on the beaten path. 3 weeks of travel from Boston had left her weary, her fashionable traveling dress now stained with the red dust of the frontier, her once elaborate hairstyle reduced to a simple braid hanging down her back. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. The man didn't startle, but his rhythm faltered slightly before he drove one final nail home. When he turned to face her, Thea was struck by the sharp angles of his sun-bronzed face, the deep furrow between his brows and eyes the color of storm clouds. He tucked the paper carefully into his shirt pocket before touching the brim of his worn hat. "Madam," he acknowledged, his voice rough like he didn't use it often, "I'm looking for the Cottonwood Springs settlement. I was told it was just beyond this ridge, but I fear I may have taken a wrong turn." Thea shifted in her saddle, feeling suddenly self-conscious under his steady gaze. "You found it," he replied. "Such as it is. This here's the edge of town." He gestured with his hammer toward a cluster of buildings visible just beyond a stand of cottonwoods. "Though I reckon you'll be disappointed if you're expecting much." Thea swallowed hard. Her brother Thomas's letters had painted a picture of a thriving community with opportunities aplenty, not the dusty collection of buildings that barely qualified as a town. "I'm looking for Thomas Reynolds. He's my brother." He wrote that he had established himself here as a schoolteacher. Something shifted in the man's expression, a tightening around the eyes, a slight clench of his jaw. He set the hammer down on the porch railing and wiped his palm on his denims before approaching her horse. "Miss Reynolds," he said, and Thea felt a chill despite the oppressive heat. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your brother passed away 6 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him fast." The world seemed to tilt beneath Thea. Her vision narrowed, and she might have fallen from her saddle had the stranger not stepped forward quickly, his strong hands steadying her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice gentler now. "Thomas was well respected here. He spoke of you often." Thea struggled to compose herself, to process this devastating news that had been delivered so matter-of-factly by this stranger. Her entire future had been built around joining her brother, helping him establish his school, making a new life away from the suffocating expectations of Boston society. "I don't understand," she managed finally. "I received a letter from him just before I departed. He was well then. He was expecting me." "Frontier illnesses can take a man quick," the stranger said. "I'm Rhett Eastwood. Your brother and I were friends." There was something in the way he hesitated that suggested a complicated history, but Thea was too overwhelmed to probe further. "Where is he buried?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "On the hill behind the church, has a proper headstone and all. The town saw to that." Rhett Eastwood stepped back, giving her space to collect herself. "You must be tired from your journey. The boarding house in town has clean rooms. Mrs. Holbrook is a decent sort, won't overcharge you." Thea's mind raced. She had spent nearly everything she had on the journey west. Without Thomas, without the teaching position he had promised would be waiting for her, she had nowhere to go and precious little means to get there. "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood, I should go see about that room." But as she gathered her reins, preparing to ride toward town, Rhett Eastwood cleared his throat. "Your brother left something for you," he said. "If you'd like to come by tomorrow, I can give it to you. I've been staying at his place, looking after things until someone decided what was to be done with it." Hope flickered within Thea's grief. Perhaps Thomas had left her enough to secure passage back east, or at least to sustain her while she determined her next move. "I'll come tomorrow then," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood." He nodded once, then stepped back, retrieving his hammer from the railing. As Thea rode away, she glanced back to see him resume his work, hammering with one hand while the other briefly touched the pocket where he had tucked that mysterious paper. The Cottonwood Springs boarding house was clean but spartanly furnished. Mrs. Holbrook, a widow with sharp eyes and a perpetual frown, showed Thea to a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. "Breakfast at 6, the woman said tersely. "Supper at 5, $2 a week payable in advance." Thea counted out the coins with trembling fingers, aware that this payment would leave her with dangerously little. Mrs. Holbrook scrutinized the money before nodding curtly and leaving Thea alone with her thoughts and her grief. That night, exhaustion finally overcame her sorrow, and she fell into a dreamless sleep. She awoke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing. After a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush and strong coffee, she set out to visit her brother's grave before meeting Rhett Eastwood. The cemetery sat on a gentle slope overlooking the town, shaded by several large oak trees. Thomas's grave was marked by a simple wooden cross with his name and dates carved into it. Thea knelt in the dry grass, brushing her fingers over the inscription, tears flowing freely now that she was alone. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered. "What am I to do now?" She remained there for nearly an hour, saying goodbye to the brother who had been her only family since their parents' death 5 years earlier. Finally, she rose, brushed the dust from her skirt, and made her way toward the homestead where she had encountered Rhett Eastwood the previous day. She found him repairing a broken window, his movements economical and practiced. Once again, she noted how he kept that folded paper close, now tucked into his shirt pocket. When he saw her approaching, he set down his tools and waited for her on the porch. "Miss Reynolds," he greeted her, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Eastwood," she replied, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. "I've come about my brother's belongings." He nodded, gesturing for her to follow him inside. The cabin was small but well built, with 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and a smaller bedroom in the back. A collection of books lined rough-hewn shelves, and a desk stood by the window, papers neatly stacked upon it. "Thomas left everything to you," Rhett said, retrieving a document from the desk drawer. "His will was properly witnessed by Judge Porter and the Reverend. The cabin, his books, what little money he had. It's all yours." Thea took the paper with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting of her brother. It was indeed a proper will, leaving his entire estate to his beloved sister, Thea Reynolds. "I don't understand," she said. "You said you've been staying here." Rhett shifted uncomfortably. "Your brother hired me to build an addition to the cabin, a proper schoolroom. We'd started the foundation when he fell ill. I was sleeping in the barn while doing the work. After he passed, the town council asked me to look after the property until you arrived. Thomas had written to them about you coming. And if I hadn't come, property would have reverted to the town after a year and a day," Rhett explained. "That's the law out here." Thea moved slowly around the cabin, touching her brother's books, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the desk where he had written his letters to her. She could almost feel his presence in the room. "You were friends?" she asked, turning back to Rhett. A shadow passed over his face. "We had our differences at first, but yes, in the end, we were friends." "What differences?" Rhett's jaw tightened. "That's not important now." Thea noticed that his left hand had moved to his shirt pocket where that mysterious paper was tucked away. The gesture seemed unconscious, a habit born of repetition. "Mr. Eastwood, may I ask what that paper is that you keep so close? I've noticed you holding it yesterday while working, and now you touch it like it's precious to you." Rhett's expression closed completely, his eyes turning cold. "That's personal, Miss Reynolds. I apologize," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Rhett broke it by clearing his throat. "I'll be moving my things out today," he said. "The cabin is yours now." Panic flared in Thea's chest. She knew nothing about surviving on the frontier, about maintaining a cabin, about anything practical beyond the genteel skills she'd been taught in Boston. "Mr. Eastwood," she began hesitantly, "I'm afraid I find myself in a difficult position. I know nothing about living in a place like this. I came west expecting to assist my brother with his teaching while he handled everything else." Rhett regarded her silently, his face impassive. "The cabin needs work before winter," he finally said. "Roof needs patching, chimney needs cleaning, that broken window needs fixing proper, and the well pump is temperamental at best. Are you offering to help me?" Thea asked, hope rising in her voice. "I'm stating facts, Miss Reynolds," he replied evenly. "But I suppose I could finish the work I started for your brother. I've been paid half already. Would seem wrong not to complete it." Relief washed over Thea. "Thank you, that would be most appreciated." "I'll sleep in the barn, same as before," he said, his tone making it clear this was non-negotiable. "I'll be here at dawn tomorrow to start on that roof before the day gets too hot." As Rhett gathered his few possessions from the cabin, Thea took the opportunity to explore what was now her home. The bedroom was sparsely furnished with a narrow bed and a chest for clothing. Thomas had lived simply, it seemed. On the bedside table, she found a daguerreotype of herself that she had sent him 2 years earlier, and beside it, a small leather-bound Bible. That evening, alone in the cabin, Thea lit the oil lamp and sat at her brother's desk, trying to make sense of her situation. She had enough money for perhaps 2 weeks of supplies if she was frugal. The cabin was hers, but without income, she couldn't maintain it. She could sell it, but that would only postpone her problems, not solve them. Exhausted, she finally retired to the bedroom where she dreamed of Boston drawing rooms and the harsh, unforgiving landscape of Arizona territory melding together in unsettling ways. True to his word, Rhett arrived at dawn. Thea, who had been awake since before first light, had managed to start a small fire in the stove and brew coffee from the supplies she found in the cabin's meager pantry. "There's coffee," she offered when Rhett appeared at the door, his tall frame nearly filling it. He seemed surprised by the gesture but accepted the cup she offered. "Thank you." They sipped in silence for a moment, the quiet oddly comfortable between them. "Did my brother tell you why I was coming west?" Thea asked finally. Rhett set his cup down. "Said you were running from something, didn't say what." Thea smiled sadly. "Not running from Mr. Eastwood, running to. I wanted more than the life laid out for me in Boston, marriage to a suitable gentleman, a household to manage, children to raise. I wanted purpose beyond that. And you thought you'd find that here." His tone wasn't mocking, merely curious. "I thought I'd find it with my brother. He wrote about building a proper school, about the children here needing education, about making a difference." She sighed. "It seems foolish now." "Not foolish," Rhett said, surprising her with the gentleness in his voice. "Just unfortunate in its timing." He finished his coffee and rose to his feet. "I'll be on the roof most of the day. Best stay clear in case I drop something." The days fell into a pattern. Rhett would arrive at dawn, work until the heat became unbearable, rest during the hottest part of the day, then work again until dusk. Thea busied herself cleaning the cabin, organizing Thomas's books and papers, and learning to cook on the temperamental wood stove. On the third day, as Rhett was repairing the chimney, Thea ventured into town to purchase supplies. At the general store, she encountered the curious stares and whispered comments of the townspeople. Clearly, news of her arrival had spread. The storekeeper, a portly man named Mr. Simmons, was surprisingly friendly. "Your brother was a good man, Miss Reynolds," he said as he wrapped her purchases. "Had big plans for this town, wanted to educate not just the white children but the Mexican and Indian children too, ruffled some feathers with that talk." "Did that include Mr. Eastwood's feathers?" Thea asked, remembering Rhett's comment about their differences. Mr. Simmons chuckled. "Eastwood's a complicated man. Came here about 2 years ago, keeps to himself mostly. Does good work though, best carpenter in 3 counties. As for him and your brother, well, they had their disagreements. But when Thomas took ill, It was Eastwood who sat with him day and night. This information surprised Thea. She couldn't reconcile the image of the taciturn Rhett Eastwood sitting vigil at her brother's deathbed with the reserved man who barely spoke more than necessary to her. "Do you know anything about a paper Mr. Eastwood carries with him?" she asked impulsively. "He seems quite attached to it." Mr. Simmons shook his head. "Can't say that I do. Like I said, he keeps to himself." As Thea walked back to the cabin, her arms laden with supplies, her mind turned over this puzzle. What was the connection between her brother and Rhett Eastwood? And what was the significance of that paper he kept so close? When she returned, she found Rhett sitting on the porch, taking a break from his labors. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his face streaked with soot from the chimney. Without thinking, Thea offered him the canteen of fresh water she had just filled at the town pump. "Thank you," he said, drinking deeply. As he handed the canteen back, their fingers brushed briefly, and Thea felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. "Mr. Simmons mentioned that you sat with my brother when he was ill," she said, settling on the porch step, her skirts arranging themselves around her. Rhett tensed visibly. "Simmons talks too much. I'm grateful to you," Thea continued, ignoring his discomfort. "It brings me comfort to know Thomas wasn't alone." Rhett's eyes met hers, and for a moment his guard seemed to lower. "No one should die alone," he said simply. In that moment, Thea glimpsed something beneath Rhett's stoic exterior, a depth of feeling, perhaps even a kindness that he kept carefully hidden. "Will you stay for supper tonight?" she asked impulsively. "I managed to get some decent beef from the butcher, and I found my brother's recipe for biscuits." Rhett hesitated, and Thea was certain he would refuse, but to her surprise he nodded once. "Thank you, that would be nice." That evening, as they sat at Thomas's small table, the conversation flowed more easily than Thea had expected. Rhett spoke of his work, of the different types of wood available in the territory, of the techniques he had learned from his father, who had been a shipwright in Maine. "How did you come to be in Arizona territory?" Thea asked, pouring more coffee for them both. Rhett's expression shuddered slightly. "Needed a fresh start," he said vaguely. "This seemed as good a place as any." "My brother wrote that this town was growing quickly," Thea commented. "Though it seems rather small to me." "It was growing," Rhett confirmed. "Until the mine started laying off workers last year. Now folks are drifting away, looking for work elsewhere." This news was troubling. If the town was in decline, what hope did Thea have of finding employment here? "What will you do when you've finished the repairs?" she asked. "Move on, I suppose," Rhett said, though something in his tone suggested reluctance. "There's work in Tucson, or so I hear." The thought of Rhett leaving caused an unexpected pang in Thea's chest. In just a few days, his steady presence had become something she relied upon, a stability in her appended world. "Well," she said, trying to keep her voice light, "I appreciate all you've done. My brother chose well when he hired you." Rhett's hand moved to his shirt pocket, touching the paper within, a gesture Thea had noticed he made frequently, especially when Thomas was mentioned. "Mr. Eastwood," she said softly, "I don't wish to pry, but that paper seems important to you. Was it something from my brother?" Rhett stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I should go. Dawn comes early." Before Thea could apologize for her intrusion, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. The next morning, Rhett arrived as usual, but there was a new tension between them. He worked silently, responding to Thea's attempts at conversation with single-word answers. By midday, she had retreated to the cabin, hurt and confused by the sudden coldness. As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, a rarity in this parched landscape. Thea watched from the window as Rhett hurried to complete his work on the roof before the storm hit. The first fat droplets were just beginning to fall when Rhett climbed down the ladder. Rather than seeking shelter in the barn, however, he strode purposefully toward the stand of cottonwoods beyond the property line. Curious and concerned about the intensifying storm, Thea grabbed her shawl and followed him. She found him kneeling beside a crude wooden cross nestled among the trees, his head bowed. The paper, that mysterious, precious paper, was in his hands now, unfolded and protected from the rain by his curved posture. "Mr. Eastwood," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, and Thea was shocked to see tears mingling with the raindrops on his face. In all their interactions, she had never seen Rhett Eastwood show such raw emotion. "You shouldn't be out in this weather, Miss Reynolds," he said, quickly refolding the paper and tucking it away. "Neither should you," she replied, moving closer. "Whose grave is this?" Rhett stood, brushing mud from his knees. "My son's." The simple statement hit Thea like a physical blow. "Your son? I didn't know you had a family." "I don't, not anymore." His voice was flat, emotionless now. "My wife died in childbirth. My boy, Luke, he made it 2 days." "I'm so sorry," Thea whispered, understanding now the depth of pain this stoic man carried. "When?" 3 years ago, in a mining camp near Bisbee." Rhett's eyes were fixed on the small cross. "I couldn't afford a proper burial there, so when I came here, I brought him with me." The rain was falling harder now, soaking through Thea's thin shawl, but she barely noticed. "And the paper?" Rhett hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew it. Carefully, he unfolded it and held it so she could see. It was a prayer, handwritten in a careful script. "My wife wrote it when she knew she was with child," he explained, his voice barely audible above the rain. "A prayer for our child's future. She never got to say it over him while he lived, so I say it for her." In that moment, looking at this broken man standing in the rain beside his son's grave, Thea felt something shift within her. The distance between them, the proper Boston lady and the rough frontier carpenter, seemed to dissolve, replaced by a simple human connection, a shared understanding of loss. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. "Will you teach it to me?" she asked, "so I can say it with you?" Rhett stared at her, confusion and vulnerability warring in his expression. Finally, he nodded, and together they knelt beside the small grave as he taught her the words of his wife's prayer. By the time they returned to the cabin, they were both soaked to the skin, but something fundamental had changed between them. That night, Rhett accepted Thea's invitation to stay for supper again, and as they sat before the fire drying out, he began to tell her about his life before Cottonwood Springs, about his wife, Sarah, about his dreams of building a home for his family, about how he had lost his way after their deaths. "Your brother found me in a bad state," he admitted. "I was drinking too much, taking risks I shouldn't have. He offered me work, but more than that, he offered me purpose, said I was wasting my talents." "That sounds like Thomas," Thea said softly. "He always saw the best in people." "He talked about you all the time," Rhett continued. "How smart you were, how brave to consider coming west on your own. He was so excited for you to help him with the school." "I wish I had arrived in time," Thea whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Rhett reached across the table, his large, calloused hand covering hers. "He knew you were coming. That brought him comfort at the end." Over the next 2 weeks, as Rhett completed the repairs to the cabin, their relationship deepened. Thea found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the quiet moments they shared at the end of each day. She learned about his childhood in Maine, about his apprenticeship with his father, about his travels westward after his family's death. In turn, she told him about her life in Boston, about her parents, about her dreams of teaching. "You still could, you know," Rhett said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and purple. "Teach, I mean. This town needs a teacher." "The school isn't built," Thea pointed out, "and from what Mr. Simmons said, the town is shrinking, not growing." "We could finish what your brother started," Rhett said, surprising her with the "we." "The foundation is laid. The town council has the money set aside still. They just need someone to convince them it's worth doing." Hope flickered in Thea's chest. "Do you think they would listen to me? They respected your brother. And this town has more children than you might think. Mexican families out by the creek, a few Apache families that settled here after leaving the reservation. They all need learning. Would the town accept a school that teaches all children, regardless of their background? Rhett's eyes met hers. Some wouldn't, but some would. Enough, maybe. The next day, Thea put on her best dress, still dusty from the journey west, but the most presentable clothing she owned, and walked into town to meet with the town council. To her surprise, Rhett accompanied her, clean-shaven and wearing what appeared to be his only good shirt. The council, consisting of Judge Porter, Reverend Wilson, Mr. Simmons, and the town's banker, Mr. Hughes, listened politely as Thea presented her case for completing the schoolhouse and continuing her brother's work. "Miss Reynolds," Judge Porter said when she had finished, "your enthusiasm is admirable, but the fact remains that our town is not growing as we had hoped. The mine is reducing operations and families are leaving, not coming. All the more reason to build something that might encourage them to stay," Thea argued. "A good school would be a draw for families considering where to settle. And who would pay your salary?" Mr. Hughes asked skeptically. "The town treasury is not bottomless." "I would require only enough to live modestly," Thea said. "And perhaps the parents could contribute what they can, goods, services, if not money." The council members exchanged doubtful glances. It was then that Rhett, who had been silent throughout the meeting, stepped forward. "Gentlemen," he said, his deep voice commanding attention, "Thomas Reynolds believed in this town's future. He believed education was the key to that future. I've traveled all over this territory, and I can tell you, towns with good schools thrive. Towns without them die." The council members shifted uncomfortably under Rhett's steady gaze. "Furthermore," Rhett continued, "I'm willing to complete the schoolhouse at cost materials only, no labor charge, and I'll maintain it for the first year free of charge." This generous offer clearly surprised the council members. After a brief discussion among themselves, Judge Porter turned back to Thea and Rhett. "We'll need to put it to a town vote," he said. "But speaking for myself, I believe Miss Reynolds should be given the opportunity to continue her brother's good work." As they walked back to the cabin, Thea's heart was light with hope for the first time since learning of Thomas's death. "Thank you," she said to Rhett, "for speaking up, for offering to build the school at cost. That was incredibly generous." Rhett shrugged, but Thea could see he was pleased. "Seems like the right thing to do," he said simply. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky, Thea gathered her courage to ask a question that had been forming in her mind. "Rhett," she began, using his given name for the first time, "when the schoolhouse is finished and I begin teaching, what will you do? Will you still go to Tucson?" In the dim light, she could see him considering his answer carefully. "I was thinking I might stay on a while," he said finally. "This place, it's starting to feel like somewhere I could belong." "I'm glad," Thea said softly, her heart beating faster. "I would miss you terribly if you left." Rhett turned to her, his expression intense in the gathering darkness. "Would you, Thea?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very much." Rhett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I've been alone a long time," he said. "Thought that was how it would always be. Then you came along and suddenly—" "Suddenly what?" Thea prompted when he fell silent. "Suddenly I'm saying my wife's prayer with different words," he confessed. "Not just for my son's tomorrows that never came, but for what might be, for new beginnings." The town vote was held the following Sunday after church services. To Thea's delight and relief, the proposal to complete the schoolhouse and install her as teacher passed by a comfortable margin. Work began the very next day, with Rhett directing a group of volunteers in raising the walls of what would be Cottonwood Springs' first proper school. As the weeks passed, Thea found herself falling into the rhythm of frontier life. She helped with the construction when she could, prepared meals for the workers, and began making plans for her curriculum. In the evenings, she and Rhett would sit on the porch of her cabin, talking about everything and nothing, their hands often finding each other in the darkness. It was on one such evening, with the schoolhouse nearly complete, that Rhett finally kissed her. The touch of his lips on hers was gentle at first, then deepening with a hunger that matched her own. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Thea knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. "I love you," Rhett said simply, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I never thought I'd say those words again to anyone." "I love you too," Thea replied, the words coming easily, naturally. "I came west looking for purpose, and I found so much more." 2 months later, on a crisp autumn day with the desert blooming after a rare rainfall, Thea Reynolds became Thea Eastwood in a simple ceremony performed by Reverend Wilson. The entire town turned out for the celebration, held in the newly completed schoolhouse that stood as a testament to Thomas Reynolds' vision and his sister's determination to see it fulfilled. That night, as Thea and Rhett lay together in what was now their home, he showed her the paper he had carried close to his heart for so long, his wife's prayer for their child. Carefully, he crossed out the words "for our child" and wrote above them "for our future." "Sarah would have liked you," he said softly. "She would have wanted me to be happy again." Thea pressed her lips to his. "Then we'll honor her by being happy," she promised, "and by keeping her prayer alive." 5 years later, the town of Cottonwood Springs had defied expectations by not only surviving but thriving. The school, under Thea's direction, had grown to accommodate 30 students of various backgrounds. Rhett's carpentry business had expanded to include a small lumber mill that employed several townsmen. And their family had grown to include twin daughters, Sarah and Thomasina, named for those they had lost, but never forgotten. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Thea would often find Rhett on the porch, his right hand working on some small wooden carving, his left holding the now worn paper that contained the prayer for tomorrow. Sometimes he would be sitting beside the small marker that had been moved to rest beneath the largest cottonwood behind their home, speaking soft words to the son he had never known. And on these evenings, Thea would sit beside him, take his hand in hers, and together they would recite the prayer that had once been for a lost tomorrow, but now spoke of the beautiful present they had built together in this harsh but magnificent land. In the wild expanse of the Arizona Territory, Thea Reynolds had found not just the purpose she sought, but a love she never expected with a quiet, complicated man who had hammered nails with one hand while holding his hopes for tomorrow in the other.